So let's have the questions one by one.
What are the yogis?
I wasn't able to find out very much about them. And all this happened years and years ago, decades ago. Right? To the best of my knowledge and recollection, the yogis are first of all a caste, a Hindu caste. Because one must remember that in Nepal, and the Nepalese caste, Buddhism has been influenced by Hinduism, and Hinduism has been influenced by Buddhism. But to the best of my recollection, they're a caste and a Hindu caste in Nepal. I believe that they're quite a small caste, and I believe that they're high caste rather than low caste, and that outwardly they're on ordinary occasions indistinguishable, from other people. Apparently they, by tradition, have this particular responsibility, that is to say, of collecting the souls of the dead. And they've been given this responsibility, apparently, to the best of my knowledge and recollection, by the Nepal Darbar, that is to say, by the king, who is of course believed to be an incarnation of Vishnu. That is the popular belief in Nepal. So what happens is there's a sort of rota system, and every adult male belonging to this caste has to take a turn of doing this particular work. He gives up his usual job and he puts on the dress of a yogi. He travels around the Himalayan area, collecting the souls. As far as I remember, they're collected on the night of the new moon, I think it was. What the Hindus call Amavasya, when the moon is at its darkest. And I think I got the impression that they were collected so as to prevent them from doing any harm. They went around, as far as I remember, dressed in a sort of white garment, sort of Hindu-style garment, white turban, perhaps a staff, I'm not sure, but they certainly had a ram's horn trumpet, and they blew on that trumpet, that horn, sort of curved, being a ram's horn trumpet, blew at night and collected the souls of the dead. And the Nepalese people, who of course were quite familiar with them, were quite scared of these yogis, and quite afraid of them. And I was told several stories about them. I mentioned the story that dogs were very afraid of them, and even fierce dogs never attacked them, just ran away when they roamed around at night, at midnight, on the Amavasya day, collecting these souls, or blowing their horns. And I heard the horn blowing, not just a half a mile away, from my own Bihara. I think that's because I asked about it then. And they come round in the morning, in those places where they've been collecting their souls, and they have to beg. They may be actually quite well-to-do people, but on that occasion, in that connection, apparently they have to beg. Whether just for the sake of begging or to support themselves, I don't know, I never inquired. But you have to give them, some grain and a few small coins. That's the tradition. So they go from house to house in the morning, wherever they've gone around collecting the souls of the dead the previous night, and they beg in this way. And people give them, are very afraid of them and very glad to see them go. So one happened to come to the Vihara one morning, and I knew about the yogis, so I was quite interested to talk to him. And my servants and the disciples, they wouldn't stay anywhere near. They brought the offering and then they fled. So I sort of told him to sit down, and I talked to him. I'm afraid I can't remember the conversation, but I just asked him a few questions about how long he'd been working. I might even picked up some of these details from him. I can't really remember, but I remember that he impressed as a very strange person, as you would expect someone having to do with the souls of the dead. He was very strange. I believe they were all like that, at least when they were performing their duties. And I think, as far as I remember, he looked more like an Indian than a Nepali, so perhaps he was the high caste Nepalese of predominantly Indian descent. I don't remember that I found out anything about their training. They must have had some kind of training, but I have no idea what it was. So these were the Yogis. Was there any other question there?
Yeah.
I've only found one reference to them since in a book about Nepal, but it only referred to them. It didn't give any proper information. But no doubt it would be possible to find out more.
So it wasn't any Buddhist, didn't belong to Buddhist tradition?
I don't think so, no. They were called Yogis. I mean, for some reason or other, the Nepalese pronounce yogi as Yogis. They were called Yogis. They were said to belong to the Yogi caste. But it was etymologically the same word as yogi.
And what happens when they collect the souls of dead?
Well, they just collect them. I didn't go into any details as far as I remember. They take them with them, back. I gathered, again, I'm not sure, back to Nepal. What they do with them, though, I don't know. Whether there's a sort of, psychic dustbin that they put them in. I don't know. I can't remember. But they collected them and took them away. They took them away. People, Nepalese profoundly believed in these things. And as I said, were really terrified of the Yogis. And I noticed, shortly before I left Kalimpong, they seemed to be coming around more and more frequently. Formerly, I'd hear them maybe every year or two. But I'm sure that towards the end of my stay, they were coming around practically every month. And I never was able to find out the reason for this, though I did notice it.
Because you gave them money.
No. I don't think that was the reason. They get so little also, just a few of the smallest coins. They had to do it as a duty. I gather they didn't particularly like doing it or want to do it, but it was the custom, it was tradition. They were required by the Darbar to do it, by the government, you might say. But it's maybe not so surprising. Even in England, we commemorate the dead with victory celebrations. We had it just a few years ago after the Falklands War. There's a service in St Paul's Cathedral, and one could say, that the English people were praying for the souls of the dead, and so on and so forth. Well, is it really, in a way, all that different? It was an official occasion. But I don't think I can remember anything more than that.
We need whether we should start a modern yogic tradition in the West.
I really don't know. Are we bothered by ghosts? One does hear, here and there of houses which are haunted. Several houses I lived in Kalimpong were supposed to be haunted. My students used to see figures. In fact, yes, several of them saw figures. But they used to say that these things appeared when I was away, but when I was there, they never came. So, one of the places I stayed in Kalimpong, they regularly used to see ghostly figures walking on the roof at night. But as soon as I came back from Calcutta or Bombay, it just stopped. They said. So I really don't know. In this way, there are allegedly haunted houses in Britain. It might be useful to have someone going around tidying them up, whatever. But perhaps we've got a lot more things to do before we can find time for that. Probably more useful to preach the Dharma. According to tradition, the spirits also hear that.
I know that the spiritualists are being contacted. Full of people who have haunted houses and have called upon mediums to try and exercise the houses of the ghosts.
Well, perhaps the spiritualists are the yogis. Perhaps we don't need to bother. Perhaps you could do a sort of yogi training under the auspices of your spiritualist friends, and then we wouldn't have to bother.
I'll think about that.